I had a big decision to make. I had been invited to be part of this amazing photo shoot for a huge publication, and it was for strong, powerful, successful female athletes. But there was a catch. The shoot was nude. Now, of course, when the photos were published, important bits would be covered, but the shoot itself was going to be nude. Now, I personally didn't have a problem with it. I think the human body is beautiful and wonderful, and I think the world could do with a few more images of disabled athletic women. But I'm not naive, and I knew that doing the shoot could affect future opportunities. And not that I think that is fair or right, but I did have to consider the reputational cost. All things considered, I was leaning towards doing it. And that evening, my mom called, and I asked what she thought. It was a swift, flat no. And that was it. Decision made. We hung up, and I sent an email declining the invite. Which is wild when you consider the fact that we spent the majority of my teenage years arguing over everything. I was convinced my mom's mission was to ensure that I had zero fun and that I had a dull, boring, predictable life, which of course then meant it was my mission to disagree with everything she said. So what changed? Why did I finally start listening to my mother? The answer to that question starts years earlier on a lake with a speedboat and a moment that changed everything. I was 15 years old, and I was at my friend's cottage for the bank holiday weekend, and I couldn't believe my parents said yes. I mean, just getting them to agree to let me go to an afternoon birthday party was an ordeal. I mean, this was 4 days and 3 nights. I prepared for battle, and I presented my case. They said no. I appealed. They said no. They said no again. The court was unyielding, but so was I. And eventually, I got a yes, with the caveat that my parents would reserve the right to reverse their decision if they didn't like what they saw when they dropped me off. Much to my relief, after 48 minutes, I watched as their car backed out of the driveway without me in it. I had the best weekend of my life. And a few hours before my parents were coming back, we decided to go tubing one last time. And tubing is when you have a rubber inner tube attached to the back of a speedboat and you go flying across the water. Now, I had hit a wave and fell off, and I was in the water waiting for the boat to come back and pick me up, like it always did. But on that occasion, there had been a miscommunication between the spotter and the driver had no idea that I was in the water and not on the tube. I saw the boat heading towards me, and I knew instantly something was wrong. He was coming way too fast. And I thought, Stephanie, your best shot at missing those propellers, if there wasn't enough time to swim out of the way, I thought my best shot at survival was to surface dive. Get as far below the water as possible. I'll hold my breath. The boat will pass over top. It's going to be fine. But I couldn't get under because I had a life jacket on. I knew how lucky I was to resurface. But I also knew something was wrong. Unfortunately, I was caught in the propellers, and I had lacerations to my lower back and my right leg. And I was scared. I knew that we were hours away from the kind of help that I needed. There was way too much blood, and I could see the fear in everyone's face. Once again, I awoke from surgery, and I knew how lucky I had been. not only to survive, but to be walking away with no spinal damage, no permanent internal injury. I'm thinking, I mean, this is amazing. I mean, I must be the luckiest girl on the planet. Which is why I didn't understand when my mom walked into the room and her face did not look like someone who thought this was amazing. And there's nothing that prepares you for what she said next. Stephanie, my darling, I am so sorry. The surgeon did everything he could, but was unable to save all of your leg and was forced to amputate. Those words were devastating, especially for someone whose life dream was to become an international rugby superstar. I thought, how am I supposed to play rugby if I can't run? But what happened next changed everything about my relationship with my mom. The surgeon walked in, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Please, can you amputate my leg and give it to Stephanie? Let me have the artificial leg. Let it be my life that changes." And I remember in that moment two thoughts. One was, wow, can science actually do that? And the second one was, please, 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 let it be the foot without her bunion. Yes, I know, 15-year-old Steph was a terrible, terrible person who, in her defense, was on a lot of drugs at the time. The answer is that both of her feet have bunions. And no, they couldn't do the transplant. Transplants don't work very well on weight-bearing limbs. Plus, with the amazing advances in prosthetic leg technology, it's just not worth the risk or the complication of anti-rejection medication. But all of this is minor detail because the point is we never fought again. In that moment, I saw the heart of everything she ever did or said. Every argument, every rule, every no. All of it had only ever been for my good. And that was the day I started listening. And that is the secret to being heard. Communication always exists with two parts. There is what you say, and there's what that person hears. And if you want to be a great communicator, you have to take responsibility for both, which I find wildly frustrating, because how on earth am I meant to take responsibility for how you are interpreting me based on your experience, your biases, and your worldviews? It feels like this impossible puzzle, and psychologists refer to it as the subjective value of information. The subjective value of information is the worth we place on a person's words, and it depends on what we think about them. Now, being heard would be easy if it was purely related to the objective usefulness of what was being said. But we're human, and that's not the case, because what we think about that person matters. Do I think this person is competent? Do I think they care about me? Are they speaking for my benefit or for theirs? The day my mom offered to give me her leg, I knew how much she cared, and it changed the way that I heard her forever. And the same is true for leadership. Now, I appreciate my mom has set an incredibly high bar when it comes to showing how much you care. And it may not be practical for you to offer a body part every time you would like a colleague or your child to listen to you. But the good news is that being heard does not have to cost an arm or a leg. One of the best parts about being a Paralympian and a world champion long jumper is that I get to work with some of the best performance coaches and business leaders in the world. And they are all great communicators. And this is what I've observed. I'll start with my long jump coach, Aston. Now, I knew from our very first training session, Aston was never going to be satisfied with just changing my technique alone. Aston believes that who you are in life is who you are in competition. And if you want to be a world champion, you have to have character. I averaged roughly 3 compliments from Aston a year. A fantastic post-session analysis would have been, Stephanie, that wasn't completely terrible. Aston was interested in excellence. And excellence in my field, it's not a daily occurrence. It's something that you work hard for. That man has given me some of the harshest feedback of my life. And it's important that you know that, because being heard is not about being nice. I heard everything he said, no matter how hard, because I never doubted his heart or his intent. We had a shared goal to make me the world's best long jumper. And he honored that goal with every word he spoke, with every session that he planned, and every time he refused to let me doubt myself. And the other thing was, Aston listened. Now, I knew Aston was not a man to dole out compliments for the purpose of making people feel good. However, I am someone who really benefits from positive affirmation. So I asked if we might incorporate a little bit more of that into our session. So the next time I asked Aston what he thought about my jump, he was silent as he gazed. And after a while, he said, Stephanie, I can see that you were really trying with that attempt. I mean, he couldn't do it. He could not pretend something was good if he didn't think that it was. But I loved him for listening, and I loved him for trying. And the same is true in the business world. Mike Sherrick was head of BP sports sponsorship across the London 2012 Olympics and Paralympics. This was one of the most coveted positions in sport or in business. And yes, of course, Mike was clever and he was strategic and he worked really hard. But what set him apart was the value he placed on relationships. We had both been invited to this 10-kilometer charity run, and my biggest focus was me. There was this sweeper bus that was going to come if you were too slow. And I mean, I'm a sprinter. I'm far more confident sprinting 40 meters than running 10 kilometers. And I was nervous, and I didn't want to be bad. Mike's biggest focus? Everyone else. I watched as he would weave his way throughout the pack, checking in on people, offering them encouragement, seeing if they needed water or jelly babies. It's not a coincidence that one of the most influential men in the world of sport and sponsorship was also the most invested in the well-being of others. That's why people listened when Mike spoke. That's leadership, and that is communication. It is not about power or authority or hierarchy. It is about the care and the attention that you give to people. We live in a noisy world where we are shouting at each other louder than ever, but no one is listening and no one is being heard. How do we shift the dial? Research says it is not about volume. It is about turning up the level of care and attention that we give to each other. Now, an important point of clarification. Hearing is not the same as obeying. You can hear someone and still disagree and still come to a different conclusion. But the reason why it matters that we hear and that we're being heard is because it opens us up to new perspectives and new data points. It's impossible to make an informed choice as either an individual or as a society if we are only ever listening to ourselves. And the good news is the formula for being heard it's here for the taking. It's 3 C's. It comes down to competence, care, consistency. Competence, care, consistency. There's no shortcut. People need to see it in your everyday interactions. And it takes time. It took me years to understand how much my mom cared. And it was never about the volume. It was only ever about me understanding. And it changed the way I heard her forever. Being heard puts you in a position of power and privilege. And that position belongs to people who care. So maybe the question never should have been, can you hear me now? Perhaps the question needs to be, can you hear how much I care? Because when someone knows that, they will hear you every time. Thank you.